Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:30 p.m. on Monday, October 12th, 2020. I'm calling this meeting of the City Council of Paris to order. The invocation will be by Gene Anderson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember of Portugal. Everyone stand, please.
May we pray? Heavenly Father, we're indeed thankful for every blessing that you give us. We know all good and perfect gifts come from you. We pray that we might have wisdom, Father, to use them wisely. We pray for our council tonight that you'd guide and direct them in the decisions that they make. Father, help this city, Father, to prosper in a way that glorifies your name. And we just ask, Father, for peace across our land. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is consent agenda. Citizens Forum. Persons desiring to address the council must limit their presentation to no more than 2 minutes unless an item is posted on the agenda. The Texas Open Meetings Act prohibits the council from responding to any comments other than to refer the matter to a future agenda, to an existing policy, or to a staff person with specific factual information. Claims against the city, council members, or employees, as well as individual personal appeals, are not appropriate for Citizens Forum. The Citizens Forum is now open. Anyone wishing to address the council, please step up, give us your name and address. You'll have a minimum of 2 minutes.
Carol Huffnagel, 720 Bunker Street, Paris. I'm just curious, who's really responsible for patching the potholes and the excavation spots on our streets? We definitely don't need speed bumps with the holes in the streets.
Thank you, Ms. Huffnagel. Anyone else wishing to address council, step forward, please. Seeing none, the Citizens Forum is now closed, bringing up the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. Anyone have anything he or she wishes to pull for additional discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda as is.
Got a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Okay, all right, the consent agenda passes. Brings us to the item number 8 of the regular agenda. Receive presentation regarding the Texas Police Chief's best practice re-recognition. Chief Tuttle.
Good evening. In 2006, the Texas Police Chiefs Association established the best practice recognition program. With Texas leaders of the Texas law enforcement, they developed 168 best practice policies and made this program available to all Texas law enforcement agencies. In 2012, the Paris Police Department first joined this program and became recognized in March of 2012. This is a process where every 4 years you have to go through an on-site inspection with assessors that come to your facility. They review your policies. They make sure that you are complying with your policies, and they also review your facilities and make sure your facilities are secure and that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. In between those 4 years, each year we have to submit an annual report to them that also has various things that show that we're complying with those policies. This past summer, July of this year, we were once again up for our re-recognition. We did have 2 on-site assessors come to our facility. They once again reviewed our policies and made sure we were complying with them, and reviewed our facilities. And they finished this and went back and submitted their findings to the recognition committee, who then voted to recognize the Paris Police Department for the 3rd time. And so we're recognized for another 4 years. And I just wanted to bring that to you and let you know.
Great, thank you, congratulations.
Thank you.
Item number 9, discuss and act on an agreement for professional services with the Texas Police Chiefs Association for assistance with the search for a new police chief, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents. Mr. Path.
Yeah, so on the same line as a TPCA, as you know, we with Chief Hunley's retirement earlier this summer, It's now, we now need to start the process of filling his replacement. We've had Randy Tuttle filling in for us as interim, doing a great job with that. And so, now, I recognize this is a very high-profile position, and so I've asked the TPCA for assistance. I did a similar thing with the fire chief one, and but this one is a little more. Every hiring process, you need to cater to the situation, cater to the position, cater to the needs, and so. I'm working with I like to work with the TPCA to set up a process, set up a community event, set up how to go about looking for candidates, what to look for in a candidate, set up interviews. It's kind of advise and guide me as I weed my way through the candidates to then bring you a name at the end of that, someone who feels qualified to do a good job for us. And so they have a program that they help cities with doing this. It's $6,000, about $5,000 fee, and not to exceed $1,000 for expenses. Seems very reasonable given the high-profile position we're looking to pursue here. And I'm just asking for permission to sign the agreement and get started. And if you approve, I'll be starting tomorrow with that. So I've already scheduled a meeting with them tomorrow, assuming tentative to tonight. So.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Path on this?
So you will start the process of working with them to get this process started, but when do you plan on getting the process actually started, searching for the police chief?
Well, yeah, tomorrow is our sit down to kind of go with the job profile, job description, kind of inform them about our community, about our department, kind of give them some facts about our department. And so from that, we would then start developing the job profile, the job description, and hopefully in the next week or two, actually getting a job ad out there. And so I would see in the next 2 weeks getting the job ad out and to advertising it across the country, across the state. And then about 3 to 5 weeks to let the ad be out there. You want to do at least a month, if not a little bit more, in order to give people, qualified individuals, a chance to see it and then apply to it. So the next 2 or 3 weeks to get a job ad out is my goal. So.
You guys have any questions for Mr. Path? All right, well, I'm in favor of this, certainly. I'll entertain a motion on this.
I'll make a motion to approve the attached professional services agreement and authorize the city manager to sign.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Path. Item number 10, discuss and act on a request to financially assist Paris Independent School District using CRF funding, program funding, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents. And we have parallel items for North Lamar and Chisholm. So we'll start off with Paris Independent School District.
I have here tonight Charles Edwards. He's our third-party administrator, and so he, Gene, and myself have been working together to look at our funds, looking at the rules and everything. And so, just a little bit of history, real quick, and I'll turn over to Charles here to discuss more. But as you know, we had about just a little shy of $1.4 million dedicated, allotted to the city for COVID-19 response, for reimbursement of expenses, the schools reached out to me about a month and a half ago or so, asking if we could assist them. They're looking at buying some hotspots, some iPads, things in order to make online education more doable for the students. Not all the students are in the building itself, and so some have gone to are choosing to do online presence, and so the schools had to come up with funding to purchase to make, give them the equipment they need in order to make that remote learning possible. And so they approached us. The TEA has provided some matching funding, and so our portion would be about a fourth of that. So, but I'm going to turn over more to Charles here now. So,
evening, council. Thank you. I'm Charles Edwards, Resource Management. Grayson explained a good bit of it, but within the last month, we've been, to give you a little background on where the city is at and we are at in collecting all the data relevant to the total CRF funding allocation you've got. We've met with various department heads in the city a couple of times to establish kind of where the city's at currently with its expenditures and what's to be expected in expenditures related to the coronavirus efforts through December 30th, which is the end of the funding period. And we're somewhere in the realm of $200,000 to $300,000 in current expenditures. We haven't nailed that down exactly because we haven't gotten to the payroll expenses yet. In the wish list, we'll say for the department heads, or expectation list of the department heads, we can anticipate possibly another couple $100,000 in expenditures by the end of the year for various purchases they would like and payroll expenses associated. So in the realm of 500,000 is what we came up with as to where the city's at currently and what to be expected by the end of the year. Now, there is an opportunity that was recently clarified by the Department of Treasury on September 21st that allows for some payroll expenses for those first responder type positions, their salaries to be reimbursed in full. So we've gained the clarification on that. So that's the opportunity for the city for the full $1.4 million allocation to have access to that. But specifically for the school districts, the TEA provided guidance, initially matched these through Operation Connectivity is what it was called, these remote learning devices that were offered out. So the school districts paid 50% and the TEA paid 50% through their own coronavirus relief funds that they received through the CARES Act. Recently, they came back to the school districts offering another program designed to fully offset those costs almost, well, nearly a 25% match on that remaining, towards the remaining funding. And then they instructed the school districts to request from communities they were associated with to gain that remaining 25% match. And that's what's before you tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that.
Anyone have questions?
I was surprised at the small amount that they're asking for. I'm glad that they felt like they've had mostly adequate funding. Are any of the school district representatives here?
There are Angela Chadwick from North Lamar and a representative here from Paris ISD as well, yes.
Bless teachers and staff during this time.
One thing I'll
Absolutely.
point out to the council, though, that when we first looked at this, we thought it could only be spent on COVID-related expenditures like, tests or personal protective equipment. And certainly according to the packet that Mr. Path gave us, we now know that even the routine salaries of the EMT people can now be, so basically, we will get all of this money and we can spend this money. So any money we give to the schools is money that the city doesn't have. Just make sure you're aware of that. Because this is money that was given to the community, but it was specifically given to the city. So if we decide to do this, understand this will take money away from the city. So it's one thing if it were we weren't going to be spending but a fraction of this, then there wouldn't be any problem with it. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but just be aware that by spending this money, this is money the city will basically be giving to the schools to help them with COVID. So am I correct in that, Mr. Path? You are correct. Okay.
So with that being said, Grayson, I would like to know your opinion on this.
Thank you, Charles. I think it's a worthwhile partnership program to do, and because I look at it multiple ways. I mean, we were very blessed this last year to where a lot of communities, their revenue struggled, and so but our revenue maintained. In fact, we hit revenue figures that we budgeted for, and our expenditures in 1920 actually came in under budget. So we were actually budget-wise okay, and so the money we received from the state would go to help build our reserve a little bit, and so we can purchase, it helps cover some of our COVID-19 expenditures, as well as some new things we can buy. We're looking at doing some more equipment we can purchase, but we're not hurting for funds like other communities were. And so looking at the school, since they did not receive COVID-19 funding directly, it would be local taxes that they have to cover that portion of it. So I think it's a worthwhile program. I think since the state and the federal government is giving us the funds, since it is not a massive portion of our funding, and we'll still receive a large chunk of it after that, it seems like a good partnership that we can spread across 3 school districts and work together on that. So I think it's a good program. I think it'd be a good thing to do.
So either way, the citizens will benefit with money they paid in.
Yes, yes. I think the way I view it, the citizens would benefit from this. And so, I mean, the same citizens who pay our taxes would benefit from this, who pay the school taxes. That's kind of, I think it's a win-win overall with that. So, but yes, I want to make sure the council is aware, the mayor, I thank you for bringing that up. I want to make sure the council is aware, that's why I put that in the memo, that we could, as a city, receive all, we've already given some to the Lamar County Health District. We did that a couple months ago. But we could receive the entire remaining balance, given they have now opened up payroll for police, fire, and EMS. So we could receive all that. But I don't, unlike some other cities, we're not hurting for that money. And so we actually did well in our budget last year. And so while it'd be nice to have that to go towards our funds, I think also it's good to help the school with this as well.
Well, I think this is a great idea. I have two daughters that are school teachers, and one of them is in one of the school districts here in Paris. And some of the kids, I do know, they don't have access to laptops and internet. And if we're going to invest any money in anybody, it should be the future, and that's the children in these schools. So I'm totally for education for our kids, and a lot of them don't want to be in the schools, inside the school. So being able to do distant learning is a must for some people because of health conditions, or they're susceptible to COVID or whatever. So investing in our children is one of the best things that parents could do right now.
What's the percentage of the dividing between the three school districts, or is it based on an amount that they spending and we match? How's that?
Yes, when Charles and Gene and I were looking at this, we were trying to find a fair way, but in the end, the schools gave us what they needed. And so the numbers you see there are what they asked for. So we felt that, that's probably the most fair way. That they asked for those specific amounts. And so that's how we provide it to them that way. And overall, it's 25% of what they totally spent per school, and is what we have there. But that's how the amount came about. Is they gave us those numbers by request. So we could authorize a different number. We could authorize something less. We could do a different formula. But Charles and I, we thought that given these what each school asked for, and since we see the total of it is not, it's less than 10% of our total funding. It seemed like we'll go with that number. So. Not a good way one way or the other possibly. It's either way is good either way. So.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
If I may add a little bit to that, Operation Connectivity that I mentioned, that was devised by the TEA back in July. And so the districts nor the TEA had any knowledge or intent of this proceeding that's happening today. And so that's really where those numbers are pulled from, is from those original orders that were placed back then. And so these are just real numbers from the individual school districts.
Any more questions on the council or discussion? All right, thank you. Anybody want to make a motion on this?
Is it all three items?
We have to do them one at a time, right? We have to do them one at a time.
Well,
so.
I make the motion that we assist Paris Independent School District using the CRF program funding.
Got a motion?
Second.
I got 2 seconds. We'll call. Okay, we'll give it to Mr. Pilgrim. All in favor? Everyone unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next item is very similar. Discuss and act on a request to financially assist North Lamar Independent School District using CRF program funding, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents. We've already discussed this. We could vote on it right now if you want to, unless you have a specific question relating to North Lamar.
I pay my taxes to them. I'll make a motion, we financially assist North Lamar School District using CRF program funding.
Okay, got a motion?
Second.
And a second. All in favor? Unanimous again. Thank you. And item number 12, we'll finish this up. Discuss and act on a request to financially assist Chisholm Independent School District using CRF program funding, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents. Any specific questions for Chisholm or a motion? Take your pick.
Make a motion to approve Grayson for Chisholm Independent School District using CRF program funding also.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Everybody? Ms. Knox, I'm sorry, did you raise your hand? I couldn't see. Okay, gotcha, okay. Unanimous. Thank you. All right, item number 13, discuss and act on an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Paris, Texas, amending Section 718 of Article 2, Building Code, Chapter 7, Buildings and Building Regulations of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Paris, Texas, to revise the local amendments to the 2015 International Building Code and the 2015 International Residential Code, making other findings and provisions related to the subject, providing a repealer clause, a severability clause, a savings clause, a penalty clause, and declaring an effective date. Ms.
All
Easton.
right, I'm going to discuss items 13, 14, and 15 all together. I think it will definitely take separate action at the end, but these are all related to our building code amendments. So as you may recall, about a year ago, the Lamar County Chamber of Commerce did kind of an educational series for our local builders and contractors and business people so that they could learn of the city requirements to either build new or renovate a building for their business purpose. The meetings were at the Love Civic Center, and it was a really great turnout. But as a part of that, there were some questions raised about our local code. We have the international building codes that we've adopted, and then we also have some local amendments. And so as a result of that, staff was directed to form a committee and review what codes we have here in Paris. Mark Lacey was very involved with this process, and he's here this evening. He's going to go over kind of the process that we went through and the recommendations that came out of that review committee. So, Mark?
All right, Mr. Lacey, you have the floor.
May I approach it?
Yes, please, please, please.
Everybody sitting in this building. Thank you. Just for your reading enjoyment. I thank you for having us here, and I want to tell you this was no small task, trying to please 28,000 people, as you all are well aware, is very difficult. And so when you mention code, you're going to have those people that understand it, those that don't, and those that could care less. You know, it's kind of all over the board. I do want to give a personal expression of gratitude to those who served on the committee with me. We were very specific in how we approached our membership. We put licensed personnel on there since they are code experts by their license. We had a gentleman, Ron Rucker, architect, who was chairman of the state licensing board under Governor Briscoe for architects. We had Christina Watson, as she is a structural engineer. We had Ron Coker, who is a fire protection engineer. Ron is not here. He's an independent engineer, works out of the Fort Worth area, so he has no vested interest in Paris other than trying to be a code guy. We had Brandon Kearney, who is a master electrician. We had Buddy Huberger, who is a mechanical, underground utilities guy, plumber, teaches plumbing code. Let's see, who else? Am I forgetting?
Wayne Brown.
Wayne Brown, but he was not a licensed guy. I was going to get those in a second. Make sure I'm hitting all my licensed guys. Thank you. We had, so we covered those are all the licensed people we had on there. It covered most of the trades. Then we had two local people who were a builder, who is well respected in town, Bobby Smallwood, who's been here for a long time. And then we picked a person who owned a lot of properties, a developer, and that was Mr. Brown, Wayne Brown, who owns a number of properties in town, commercial and residential. So we had a broad spectrum of involvement. We also included ad hoc members, the building official, at that time was John Ankrum, Clyde Cruz, Chief Cruz, our fire marshal, and Carla, our city engineer. And they were ad hoc members of the committee to give us advice and participate in discussions and help us steer through the quagmire we call the code. So that's who we had on our code. It was not intended to be stacked or leaning one way or the other. It was code professionals whose licenses require them to build structures by the code. And so understanding that's how the committee was made up. And then we had a large property owner and a builder because they're involved in the process as well. During our public hearings, the number one thing that stood out, as we held it here in your chamber, was consistency. That was overwhelmingly, I want to say of the 11 or 12 speakers we had, Chief Cruz had a tally going. Was it 12 people we had speak, Chief? Yeah, we had 12 people speak, and of that, 7 of them mentioned specifically consistency and application of the code. I personally went out and talked to several large contractors in town. One of them was Brad Drake. I don't mind mentioning Brad. And Brad, Everybody knows the Drakes here in town. Brad's thing was, I don't mind following the rules as long as everybody else does as well. So that's that consistency that we kept hearing. With that in mind, when we went to the code meeting, because we have a lot of armchair quarterbacks around it, don't trust our building officials or our code enforcement. For some reason, the city seems to be an easy target, and I disagree. I think y'all are doing everything you're supposed to do, but you know how that is. You can't make everybody happy. So we tried to address those issues as well by getting them to participate in the conversations, to let them know that we're not their enemy. We're here to look after their interest, their life safety, and the value of their property and the economic welfare of our community. And when a fire occurs within the city of Paris, it doesn't just impact that individual business, it impacts the entire community. We lose a loss of revenue, loss of jobs, disruption of daily activities, and it's hard to overcome those things. And so we had all of this in mind as we were discussing things. And in a nutshell, it was really, there wasn't that much to really change out. There were some things that we could make better, but overall, the process showed that the city is doing a good job. You had good staff. There are some communications and process issues that the staff is well aware of, as is the city manager, but those are internal that are simple to fix. In terms of the legislative body, you all, these are the things that we came up with that you're looking at in front of you today. I think, is that a pretty good backdrop for everybody? The chamber was instrumental in this as well. Paul Allen got a chance to witness some of our issues firsthand, I believe downtown, and saw how we were trying to resolve those issues. So, going through the code, the number one thing that really stood out in terms of other than consistency was the 6,000 square foot rule, sprinklers. I handed each of you a very complex graph. It is one short section of a very thick book. A lot of people misinterpret sprinkling as a very simple issue. Oh, you're 6,000 square foot, you got to sprinkle. Oh, you're 12,000 square foot, you got to sprinkle. Well, it's a little more complex than that, and that's why you have code professionals on your staff, architects, engineers, who get with people who are interested in building a building or remodeling. They sit down with them, find out what they're going to do. They come up with their plans by their licenses and by the code. Then they bring those plans to your staff for review to make sure that things aren't being missed. Many of you are business owners who have built buildings in the past, I would think, or have gone through this process. And I think you've seen it firsthand. Sometimes it gets a little messy, but for the most part, overall, it flows forward. Otherwise, your buildings wouldn't be built. All right? So with what you have in front of you, I'm here to answer any questions. You've seen the items that they have recommended being changed. One of them is already in the code, item number 1. It was interpretation of the code to create a board of appeals for contractors to appeal code interpretation by building and fire officials. That is currently in the code. Chapters 1 and 2 of the IBC and IFC both already have that, and you have adopted those codes as your ordinance. So it's already in there, but it's not being fulfilled. And it might be because of several reasons, finding enough people to serve on those boards. We need more qualified people to take an interest in this in the community, because it affects us all, correct? I would see nodding heads would be good. The second one was eliminate the verification by notary that the home was treated for termites. The building official, John Ankrum, was very involved in that part of it, because that's not my area of expertise. And John said he agreed with that, spoke to it to the committee agreed, so we eliminated the notary. Eliminate the local amendment requiring buildings over 6,000 square foot. I want to come back to that one, if you don't mind. Eliminate the local amendment that does not allow separation by firewalls to eliminate fire sprinkler requirement. That is a complex one as well. Ron Rucker, the fire protection engineer on our committee, was supportive of that. It does create some problems on the fire code official side because people can manipulate, but I think those can be handled internally with guidance from management and the council and the Board of Appeals. I think those things can be resolved. The other one was allowing the local amendment, the city manager shall have the authority to waive any local amendment. May I take this down?
Yeah, please do. When you're talking.
All right, thank you. to waive any local amendment after hearing both sides of the issue and making sound judgment based on information provided. We were in favor of that as a committee, but there's question, is that really where you want to go? That's your call, and we'll talk about that in a little bit and answer any questions you have on it. Because you have a Board of Appeals already, item 1, you've established a Board of Appeals. Do you really want to have a manager? It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's something y'all need to decide how you want to handle that. And then accept the modifications, local amendments to the IBC, International Residential Code, and the Plumbing Code as proposed by John Ankrum and Buddy Huberger. Both of them went through that code very detailed and they made the recommendations, I think, as noted in the ordinance. It's in front of you. Those were the items that we came up with. A couple other items that were mentioned by Wayne Brown and Bobby Smallwood, who were very active in the committee. I mean, they didn't speak a lot, but we prodded and begged, please give us information. And they played with us nicely. One of them was anchor bolts. That was one that was brought up, and Christina was very helpful on that. As an engineer, structural engineer, she gave alternatives to that question to the builder who asked that, and he was very satisfied with that answer. Is that not a true statement? The other one was brick ties. Of all the things that we could talk about, brick ties was the other one that came up, and I understand that that takes man hours and time on when you're doing things, but they were, again, the structural engineer answered that question, and I believe when we were done with it, he was satisfied with the answer and understood why that's there. I have personally gone to a funeral for 2 firefighters who were killed from veneer walls collapsing on them in my career. I understand the need for brick ties as well. All right, so those were our 6 suggestions or recommendations to this body. You are the leaders of this community, elected by the populace, and it's your call whether you want to take those recommendations or just amend it up or however you want it. It's your call. And so I'm here to answer any questions for you.
Okay, Mr. Lacy, and we had a discussion last night about item number 5 and about whether it would be appropriate for the city manager to be the one to have the authority, the single-handed authority to waive the local amendment, or whether it would be more appropriate that the Board of Appeals that we're going to create might it not be more appropriate for that board to be the final arbiter rather than just the city manager, who probably doesn't have near as much experience. He's a nice guy, but as far as experience with all of this stuff, that we will set the, so that was my one suggestion. And I think you and I were in agreement that might be a good minor change to make to this.
Yes,
What's
sir.
your opinion on that?
I agree with you, Mayor. I checked with a dear friend of mine who's a city manager in another city and asked him that very question, and he was very much in line with what you're just talking about. He says, you don't ever want to put your manager in a position where he has to undermine his staff, and it doesn't present well to the community, it doesn't present well for him, and it creates problems. He's busy doing other things. You have a board of adjustment that is there for that purpose. So if this council, I would support that if this body wants that. But I'm only one person, but I would think y'all are the bosses. If y'all choose that, I think it's not a bad way to go.
And this item 1 will require us to create a new board and populate it with these people, so it would be a new city board?
Yes, sir. It's currently in your code to have that.
Okay.
And I think even your ordinance might have to be looked at how you can get more people, applicants for those boards, because I think there's very specific qualifications that are specified. But again, that was something that your management team and y'all can work out outside of our purview, what we were here for.
Might I add
Yes.
about number 5? That one had a tied vote. There was a lot of discussion on how to move forward. So in the drafts that are presented, that's not included. We did not add that language in because the board was even split on how to address that. So I don't think that requires any change from what you've got before you today.
Thank you.
And I would support it being the Board of Appeals as well, so.
Okay, so if we pass this, that's the way it will be. I mean, because the way it's worded here, it still says the city manager. What's in the actual physical amendment?
No, sir. Yeah, whatever it is, I would eliminate that amendment. I would support eliminating the manager being able to
Eliminate the
override
manager and
board. Yes.
substitute the Board of Appeals for the final.
Yes,
They would
sir.
have the authority to waive any of the requirements.
Yes, sir.
If something in a very specific instance,
Yes.
it maybe the code is in general, it makes sense, but in this one particular instance, it doesn't make sense, and it's hampering someone's ability to build. So the board would have the authority then to waive that? Is that what we're saying?
They do.
Or they
It's
do
very
not?
specific in the code how it defines that, is their job is to interpret the application of that specific piece of code being appealed. So did the AHJs, who, in your town, you have two authorities having jurisdiction, the building official and the fire marshal. Those, building official he is the AHJ under the building code, and your fire marshal is the AHJ under the fire code. And in that ordinance, as you adopt it in total in chapters 1, 2, it identifies their specific roles and their responsibilities and authority. And so that's in the code. The Board of Appeals is also in there, and it identifies how that should be functioning. But their job is to say, did the building official or did the fire marshal interpret that section of the code that's in question correctly and apply it correctly? That's their total. Your city attorney can get involved and explain it more, but that's kind of where that goes.
So if we strike 5, then the existing code already has that in it, and we don't have to do anything else?
That's correct, sir.
Gotcha. Okay.
Strike 5.
Gotcha. Okay.
The hard one to talk about is the 6,000 square foot, number 3. That one was a little bit confusing. It's the one that we heard a lot of during our public hearings. It's the one that seems to cause a lot of consternation within our community and confusion with some builders. They'll come in at 5,990 square foot to try to get around a 6,000 square foot. I get it. There's 2 reasons it's in there. One is your fire department doesn't have the staffing or the equipment to handle the state of Texas has adopted, I'm gonna throw out a number, 1710, NFPA 1710 as their staffing standard for the state of Texas. What that is, it says a fire department has to put X number of firemen on a residential fire in so many minutes. They have to put X number of firemen on a commercial fire in so many minutes. You all meet the residential side of that equation. You are not meeting the commercial side. You don't have the staffing. Your equipment is a little bit out of date. And I'll let the chiefs talk about that in their budget presentations, whatever we want to do. It's just my observations coming in and trying to help. And so my suggestion or recommendation or information to you, I guess it would be, is you have to make a choice. You say, we can keep the 6,000 square foot, continue to muddle through this mess we have until we can get staffing and equipment in place to where we can provide for the safety and security of not only the buildings and our occupants, but the firefighters themselves. Because a sprinkler system's job is not to put the fire out, it's to hold the fire in check in the incipient phase. I teach that. That's what that is. And so a sprinkler system keeps the fire small enough so that your minimal staffing can then get there and do its job. Without a sprinkler system, the fire can get a little bit out of control, get bigger, and beyond the capabilities of your department. So you as the legislative body have things to discuss as you get into your budget processes and strategic plans, how you want to address and take your department into the future. The 6,000 square foot rule is there to help your department overcome its shortcomings in certain areas, okay? You do get a benefit on that on the insurance side, so that, better insurance rates because it keeps your fire losses down, saves your structures. You don't have that loss of ad valorem tax and sales tax and jobs because the building is still functional. But it is a problem. The code, that piece of paper I gave you, shows you that is straight code. So you'll notice on there, there's not a lot of 6,000 square foot buildings. I'm not asking to read it all, but you'll see it goes from assemblies all the way down to residentials, storage buildings, institutionals, churches and whatnot, daycares. And it's very specific about size and type of construction. And then occupancy loads come into play as well. And so it's a very complex issue on what needs to be sprinklered. For the consistency's sake that we're trying to fix with your citizens' input right here is I recommend let's just go basic code. And then we had a lot of discussion on the committee. Your fire protection engineer, your fire marshal, as fire professionals, obviously want sprinklers. Ron Coker was very animate about that. I think sprinklers are important for Paris. I get it. But you as a council have got other things. I mean, you have a lot to worry about, right? Financial, budgeting it out, staffing, other services. So you all have got to kind of weigh those things out. There's also an implication that could impact all of your citizens, and I'm not saying it will, but it could, is on your ISO rating. How will getting rid of sprinkler systems in these smaller occupancies impact our fire losses? Will it increase them? And if it increases them, that is a factor in your ISO rating. And ISO is how they determine your insurance rates. I brought a lady from the Texas Department of Insurance up here to Paris, and we gave a presentation to the community at the Love Civic Center on this very issue, explaining how the ISO works. Your Chief McMonagle has gone through an ISO audit. He can tell you they're rather in depth. They consider your code enforcement, your water system, your staffing, your equipment, your fire losses, training hours. There's a number of things they take into consideration, and all that weighs into Paris being an ISO 3. You guys are due for another ISO. It's done every 5 years. I'm not sure that you will still maintain a 3. I'm not sure you won't. The only ones that are going to know that are the auditors from TDI or PPC, ISO, when they come and meet with your departments and do an audit of your city. The beauty of that is you don't have to accept our recommendations. It's your call. You're still the legislative body of this community. It is your decision where we go. Yes, ma'am.
Question, a lot of people may not understand the iOS, and that a score of 3 is excellent, 1 to 10, with 1 being the best. A lot of communities our size don't have a 3.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we get such a good score, iOS score, if we don't meet the needs of our commercial buildings and industrial buildings?
Yes, ma'am. I'll let Chief McMonagle, if he would like, I'm not putting him on the spot. Is he in here? Chief, you went through that last audit, and we were just talking about this in the back of the room. Since that audit was done, you've lost credit for your truck. It's over 20 years old, so you've lost an aerial apparatus. And I'll let him go through the rest of it.
Good evening, Council. 5 years ago, we went through that audit, and we managed to keep it at a 3, which is what it was in 2003. But we did that because we had a lot of new apparatus. From 2003 to 2015, we suffered a loss of manpower, so that dropped the response capabilities down that Mr. Lacy was talking about. As the time has gone on, like you mentioned, our ladder truck, we're beginning to lose credit for that. We're right on that 20-year mark with that ladder truck, and we're starting to see some changes on that. We will be due for another audit, but that's one of those things that they don't just come in usually and say, okay, we're going to score you. It requires us to come in and ask for that. And we will be preparing for that over this next year as well, just to give you a benchmark of where we stand. We want to stay current on all of that. But right now, we have been able to maintain that ISO of 3 due to the efforts, the training, the equipment we have, and as well as our water resources as well. The water department does an excellent job of keeping that up. Dispatch plays a part in that. There are a lot of factors that goes into the ISO rating. They're actually completely out of the fire department's control. But we do everything we can to keep the score as high as we can, because we believe our citizens deserve that.
Mr. Lacy sent me something that the median score on the ISO is 5. So half the fire departments in the country get worse than 5, and half get better than 5. So it sounds like with a 3, that's actually an excellent rating.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
It's just every year, 5 years, you've got to reevaluate. That's why I said I can't commit whether it will impact you negatively or positively. I just need you to educate you, let you be aware. I like to give you all the information so you make an educated decision.
It's been in our strategic plan, our 10-year strategic plan for, I know, the last 12 years since Chief Wright, well, excuse me, not the last 12 years, last 8 years. Chief Wright came in 2012, and we put that into the strategic plan to start increasing our manpower and start beefing up our apparatus to prepare for the next ones as we went along. So we've had that in our plan all along. We just hope the economic capabilities of the community will allow us to do that.
How many firefighters would you be thinking would be needed to be added in your strategic plan over the next, I don't know how many years?
Looking at the next 10 years, if we wanted to open up the station on the east side of town, I'm looking at, let me see, probably 15 to 16 firefighters that we would have to hire to get full staffing and to get full credit for all of that. Because we're running 4-man engines, which is something that we get credit for that as well, but to adequately staff Station 2, you're looking at 3 times 4 is 12, and then you've got to have people to cover their time off and their days off and such as that. So we're looking at 15 to 16 firefighters just over the next 10 years to be able to do that.
I have another question.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Lacy. How did you determine going from 6,000 square feet to 12,000 if you're a little iffy that 6,000 is too stringent? That's a big jump.
Yes.
Why not 9,000 square feet or something like that?
Yes, ma'am. I don't have a good answer for that, to be honest with you. 12,000 was a number that was just thrown around in the community. I don't know where it came from. It's just I hear that a lot from people saying, well, if we didn't have the 6,000, we wouldn't have to sprinkle it to 12. That's not true. That's why I gave you this. It depends on the use of the structure and the type of building material they're using. That's why I wanted to give this to you so you have it directly out of the code. That 12,000 number is thrown around a lot, and it's really not valid to a lot of
So
things.
this will be what's applicable if we go ahead and get rid of the 6,000 requirement for
Yes, sir.
sprinkler.
That, and there's
We'll
some
revert
other.
to this, which isn't a straight up 12,000.
Yeah.
It's a
So
sliding
so
scale.
on a, going into fire code, this, no enough just to be dangerous, but if I remember right, if you're non-combustible, and let's say you're 40,000 square foot warehouse style, maybe for pipe, your pipe warehouse that you're just storing steel in a steel building, would that need to be sprinkled then?
Looking at, you're using a type 1 construction?
You got to answer
Yeah,
that,
you
I'm
use
not
type
sure.
1, looking at S's, if you look at this chart, it's on page 103. Go down the bottom there, it shows your S's, S2 and S1. And so it tells you, and then there's some footnotes there you have to look at as well, NS, S1, SM. So the very back page, it gives you those footnotes. It's not as clear cut as just saying 40,000, because if you look at 9,000 square foot in an S1, under type 5, it's 9. And under S5, I'm sorry, type 1, S1 type 1 construction is 48. But if you'll notice, there's that unlimited under A there, UL. And so the fire marshal and building official, that's why they have to sit down in a pre-development meeting, find out what they're storing, what their processes are, building wall heights. It's not just area, there's a total height structure that applies in there as well.
So
there's a lot
even
of
outside
things.
of code, the cotton warehouse is on 19.
Oh, yeah.
USDA required us to put in this just monster fire suppression
Yes.
system, and we built these warehouses, and the difference in cost of construction from putting it in and not putting it in, I think, was about $2 million.
Yeah, it's not
It's a
cheap.
lot of money.
It's
And-
not cheap.
And the way that you have to have a positive flow pump, it's gotta be right there, it's gotta be able to go. I think it had to have half of the sections in the 2 different buildings had to be able to run simultaneously and et cetera. Obviously, cotton in a warehouse like that's extremely combustible.
Sure, the dust is as well, yeah.
Yeah, but you have if that was a pipe plant down there, and we were just in the pipe business, or we were in the,
Non-combustible items.
we made channel iron for a living. We're like Prefert Steel in Mount
Sure.
Pleasant. We're shoving it in a warehouse just to keep the rain off of it. Not a combustible thing, but in our current code, in our city code, if that building's over 6,000 foot, it don't matter what we're putting in
That's
it.
correct. Under
So
your
what
code,
we're
it's all
changing
buildings.
is not 6 to 12, we're also changing to 12, but we're also changing, if you build a 6,000 square foot building and you're in the paint manufacturing business.
be sprinklered.
You're gonna sprinkle it.
Yes.
There ain't nothing you can get
That's-
around from it.
you understand,
But if-
Mr. Pilgrim,
If I'm
yeah.
a 6,000 foot building guy and I'm building it out here on the loop to store, like I say, angle iron.
Sure.
Or road tin or things, that, that are
Rocks.
non-combustible.
Yeah.
Then I'm spending another probably $25 a square foot on an 8,000 square foot building. Do the figuring. I mean, it's a
That's
lot
correct.
of money.
That's correct. I think going straight code eliminates that problem. But again, your fire department resources, the word all creates the problem. All structures, I think it's all buildings, 6,000 square foot or greater shall be sprinkled, or however it reads, something like that. Chief Cruz can probably cite it to you verbatim. But that's the problem, is all buildings. Because you
Anything
can't do that.
residential, anything housing people.
That
any-
has to be, yeah.
Yeah, anything built with wood and carpet and wood floors or office buildings, anything over 6,000 square foot period, that
Sure.
would have to be sprinkled still within this code if we
Yes.
changed it. correct?
Downtown here, if you, like Emmett Lee's buildings here on the square where you're putting Airbnbs, that's a residential occupancy, of course, it has to be sprinkled. And it's not anywhere close to 6,000 square foot, that part of it. But, so the code officials make those calls. And you got to trust them. I've met your staff. I don't have a dog in this fight, other than caring about Paris. I am retired. I'm happy. I teach at the university. I'm set. But I do care about Paris. I think we have a beautiful town that has yet to reach its full potential. But we can. But we need strategic leadership, vision, and clarity of vision. And then we need to trust our staff to make us move to that vision that y'all outlined. You say this is where we want Paris to be, and let your staff get there and give them the resources to get it. I think we'll move forward, and this can be the town that we all dream it can be. My father-in-law cried talking about Paris in the old days. I don't see, maybe a few old timers here, but just when you come in on South Church Street, coming to Paris, and you'd come in 82 and you'd see all those beautiful frame homes in the streets, he would just get teary-eyed talking about it because he grew up here. This didn't happen overnight. This happened not on anybody's watch. It's not anybody's fault. It's like cancer. It just kind of comes in and it sneaks up on you. But we got to fix it. I mean, and that's your task as leadership of this community, is to take us to that next level. I believe that all of you want to do that. Now, we may disagree on the roads we want to take to get there. This is one road, I think, that we can agree upon, that we want to enforce our codes to ensure not only the buildings being built in Paris are safe, but to ensure that the existing buildings are safe and to protect their values. I was in that position before, and I used to tell a developer, he'd come in from another town, and he would argue about the cost of his project. And I thought that was very nice, very nice. But my job, my role in your position was to look after my citizenry, not his bottom line. My citizen who lives in this home and has lived here for 25, 30, 40, 50 years deserves my attention more than you coming in wanting to build an R6 subdivision with 1,200 square foot homes on it and just degrade the value of that person's property. That is one of the things that I've heard all of you, I do follow this council. I do follow your planning zoning. I think everybody wants to move where we need to be. It's just we haven't decided how we want to get there. I think you all have that undaunting task of making that happen. You have great staff. We're losing some people. We've had a big turnover. John Ankrum leaving, our city engineers leaving. We're having changes. I get that. Changes, it's going to always occur. There's no guarantees for any of us. But the vision needs to be there so that when the next person steps in, they can just pick up the baton and keep moving towards that vision. And if we can get this council and under the leadership of the mayor and you all to make that happen, I really trust the people you have working for you to get you there. Your staff needs your support. I know I'm cheerleading right now, but they really do.
So on item 3, basically you're just taking away the mandatory, if it's 6,000 feet, you put sprinkler system and you just let the staff, the trained staff, the professionals determine if you need it, which could potentially save builders a lot of money, because,
Yes.
we've heard about the sprinkler system, and how expensive it is.
They are expensive.
So, other than that, what else?
That is the number one thing. I think you got to consider how you want to address your staffing issues to make sure you keep an ISO rating, to make sure you don't risk your firemen. But I think you need to keep that in mind as you're considering to understand the 6,000 square foot was there because your firemen can't fight fires much bigger than that. That's about the size of a large residential home, right? I don't have one of those 20,000 square foot homes. Mine's pretty small. So, but 6,000 is about a good size home. So that's where that number probably came with. It came out of the COG. I can't read their minds. I don't want to, but that's probably what they were thinking. Because we're not the only city in the COG. And so I think, sir, that's probably what they were looking at.
Okay, so Grayson, that's probably a lot of work on the staff, research, determination, and finding time to dig into this and see what's needed. Right now, it's just, if it's over 6,000 feet, you just do it, square feet, you just do it. So what do you feel about that as far as staffing and time?
As I understand this, this is straight code here in a sense. So when the developer comes in, they design this, and so they design it per code, and so then we review that. And so as I understand the process, when the developer comes to town, they get their architect, their design people on board, and so then they go off of this, and then they design it for us, and then we just review it. And so, it's not that much more work for that. And so, right now, the design specialists are having to adapt to our code of 6,000 or more, whereas this is a little more universal. And I think that's a fair statement, a little more universal. So those who are trained in this, they're used to seeing this and designing off this. And now, obviously, it is easier for us to say 6,000 plus, boom, instead of showing someone this, because then they have to kind of figure out where they fit and everything. But if they get a design special on board, which we always recommend, always get your engineer, always get your architect, always get your design special on board, they can do this for the developer. And
So the work is more on them than your staff, and then
yes.
it's.
Yes, yeah. We don't want to design something for them. Our job is just to double check for the citizen safety that their design specialist did follow the code, and so.
Okay.
Could I ask Ms. Easton a question? Could you kind of go through the plan review process that the staff does once a contractor or developer has come forth?
Sure. When someone reaches out and they have a project, it can come in any phase. Sometimes they need a zoning change before they can ever do what they're trying to do, or they need to plat. So there's kind of three main issues. We consider it zoning, then platting, then building permit, and then you get to construction. So we always encourage a pre-development meeting, and that includes myself, the building official, the public works director, the city planner if we have one, and then the fire marshal, so that we can answer questions up front. Things like, if we know that they want to build a 7,000 square foot building and we have this code amendment, we can tell them that in this meeting.
We're all together.
Yeah, we're all together in the conference room, and basically it's a time for us to give the developer or the businessman, whoever's wanting information, we can share with them what we know about our process and how they can navigate that process. So then they start with their submittals. If they've got their zoning approved, then they proceed with platting. And then once the plat is finalized and they can get their building permit, they submit their plans for review. We do have an on-staff building official, and he reviews those in-house. There's been a few times where we've had to do third-party review, and it slows us down quite a bit, but we are blessed to have one on staff. And so within a couple of weeks, he's got review comments back to the design professional, or he's ready to issue that permit. And then they come in, they pay for their permit, and then they get going. And that's when construction starts, and we're called for inspections.
Okay, so when he brings you, the building official, the plan, you're not all back together again?
No, typically building plans are reviewed by a plan reviewer that's trained in building code, and I've brought our set of codes here. That's the IBC and the IRC and the fire code, and so it's a lot to know, and that's why he's a code professional, because he's making sure that those drawings comply with what the code says, as well as our local amendments. And what we're talking about here today is modifying the local amendments. The Building Review Committee did not propose any changes to the base code. They're just talking about what the local amendments provide, which are in addition to what the base code provides. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for that, because, Mr. Lacy addressed this right at the beginning, but the chief concerns, it says here, when that group, I believe, first got together, was that the codes themselves are not the problem, or their number one concern, but rather consistent enforcement. So that says to me that somewhere within that staff plan review, these people have to do it and these people don't. And I hear that, I hear that directly from contractors.
Yeah, what I have experienced, because I've gone out and done some work for y'all, is the plan review process works, but when you go out to the job site and you look, and you're out there actually boots on the ground and you're looking, you go, uh-oh. For example, I just did this with a building across the street. I go in, I know the guy who designed it, and I'm looking and I'm saying, something's not right here. And this is based off my experience and expertise, is anything over 2.4 foot supposed to have a sprinkler head in it, depth of a closet. Well, his closets were nearly 4 foot wide and 8 foot long. That has to have a sprinkler hit it, but it didn't have one, so I'm looking at the plans as approved, and it showed a 2-foot closet by 4-foot closet. So those are the things that you find out in the field that some builders, or they find as you're being inconsistent. I got an approved set of plans. Well, then you should have built it as per the approved set of plans. And without hurting their feelings, you just kind of dance around that and just say, well, you know, you need to talk to your contractor, your sprinkler contractor, because this isn't right. And so the guy was there, and I know the guy who designed it, so I just called him. I said, hey, Paul, and got on speakerphone, and he goes, yeah, that's supposed to, I missed it. And he's talking to his supervisor. So they view that as being inconsistent. That's one avenue, and it's really not. It's what you find in the field.
Yeah.
If I go in to see the doctor here and I say, hey, I think I'm having a tumor, right? Well, he goes in, okay, and he gets in and finds something else. That's not a inconsistency. Once you get in and start looking, you find something different. And so that's kind of what's going on, and a lot of people interpret that as inconsistency. One of the things that I do agree with on the consistency side of it is, and I got to be careful how I say this, it's not derogatory towards anybody, is when you have people involved, eyes see different things. And so I could go out and I could miss something on this job, and then I go over to Ms. Knox's business, same business, and now I've had my coffee and I'm a little more alert, and now I see this. You know, we're all human. We do miss things like that, and I'll miss it on yours and I'll catch it on hers, but then y'all talk at the coffee shop, and you know, Ms. Knox tells Ms. Portugal, he made me do this. Well, he didn't make me do that, and then it comes back to the city that we have a problem. I don't know how you address that so much, because we're all fallible in that regard. Those are things that we just have to kind of eat crow and explain as we go. But I think these amendments that we propose to y'all are solid. I think that y'all are moving in the right direction. Again, you have great staff. I think we have good leadership in the community. I think the citizens want this based on all the public information we've taken in. Everybody's saying the same thing. Let's move forward. So let's quit looking in the rearview mirror, and let's look forward and take Paris where we need it to be. I think this council can do that. So that's my recommendation, is adopt these with the changes that we've talked about. I think the committee would be on board with those. The thing, you know, I can't speak to them, but some of them aren't here, but y'all are the body that has to make that decision. Again, trust your staff. Let's move forward. Set the vision where you want us to go, and let them get you there. Give them the resources necessary. I hope I haven't talked too long, Mayor. I'm done. Okay.
Did you have a question?
Anybody else?
No, he answered it within, it was also the, maybe the suggestion of perhaps selective enforcement, but
Yeah.
that was addressed
Okay.
adequately,
Well,
so thank you.
I have a couple
Appreciate
questions.
that.
Now, you were saying that we're not adequately staffed to handle, right now, even at 6,000 square foot.
That's the limit of your capabilities, I
Yeah,
think, with your
so
department. Yeah.
Changing it right now to a larger amount, would that be more dangerous for the city?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In a nutshell, it would.
Yes.
But you, again, as leaders of the community, have to balance your resources, needs, and allocation to your strategic plan. You can phase this out. You might say that, you know, we're going to keep it now, and we're going to work on it as we get our staffing up, then we can phase that out and fall back. That's, again, y'all's call.
Yes.
You could say we want to get rid of the word all and put in 6,000 square foot. You can amend that in any way you see fit. You might even want to table that after you talk to your fire marshal and building official. I mean, there's all kinds of options y'all have. But we know that what we have right now is causing issues.
Okay.
And it's causing the
Can I
appearance of
jump in here just a
inconsistency.
second? Because one of the reasons this was done was because you got to have this balance between being reasonable and safe. You know, we want everyone to be safe, but the way it was working was there was people wanting to put businesses downtown, and they were saying, "Oh, sorry, you got to put a sprinkler system in your 6,001 square feet." And it was going to, well, if in that case, I can't put it in. And it was harming development dramatically and leading to an overall bad reputation. But it's always a trade-off, you know, it's always a trade-off. We could have a totally safe, this building isn't even sprinkled, is it? We'd all be safer if we sprinkled this building. We choose not to do that because it wouldn't make economic sense. But would we be safer? Sure, we'd be safer if we did it. So our job is to decide what makes sense for our community, what will maximize safety for the citizens and yet not be a massive hindrance to development.
Yes.
And that's what they've come up with here. And like Mr. Lacy said, the number one thing was consistency. I had personal experience with that when I was building our new office. One person came in and told us something, we did it, and another person came in, you can't do that, it has to be something different. Well, we did it the way Joe Blow told us to do it. Well, it's wrong now. And mine was not an isolated incident. I know some of the things Mr. Lacy said, it was misunderstandings, but there really is a perception in the community that there's conflicting things that we get. So setting up this board is a wonderful idea, and I'm glad it was already in the code.
Yeah.
But personally, I'm in favor of all of these. I think y'all thought these through. I was there when we started this. I was at the meeting when everybody was going at everybody, and I was the one that said, let's set this group up and let the experts come up. Because the number one thing was, we want everyone to be safe. Don't propose anything that's not safe. And I don't believe that they have. I think these make good sense for the community.
They do.
And it will help us move forward, will help the city develop. But I mean, there's no perfection. Like I say, this building isn't sprinkled. Maybe we need to sprinkle it. How much is it gonna cost? Is
Yes.
it worth it?
I've heard that.
What's
one
the
of those
benefit
things.
from it? And so, personally, I'm in favor of all these. That's just my opinion on this.
Yeah.
Except for number 5, I
yeah.
think we should give that to the
The mayor has pointed out a very good point, is I've heard that said out there in my out preaching this, cheerleading for Paris, is that, why should I have to do it and the city's not even doing it? And so that, some validity there. If you're going to be, it's like walk the walk. If you're going to talk, you got to walk the walk. But, it's again, leadership, y'all got to make that decision, not me. This is on y'all. And so I think these recommendations that the committee come up with, we worked it hard. We didn't get to meet as much as we wanted because the COVID kicked in. But through the public hearings, the public information and education seminars we had, we've been out selling it in the community the best we can. I really think this is a good starting point. How y'all want to approach it, again, that's the tough part of your job, is you got to be the ones to decide. I could say, give everybody cake and ice cream, and you guys got to be the bad guys and say no, it's bad for them. So y'all got to make that call. And so if y'all got any other questions for me or any other.
Going back on number 3, we would be eliminating our local amendment that states you have to put a sprinkler in a 6,000 square foot building no matter what, to
Following the
this
base code.
building code that is universal, international building code that's used everywhere.
Yep.
That if you had a 6,500 square foot building, let's say, that was obviously did not need a sprinkler system. Chief, I want your opinion on this. If I had a 6,500 metal building, metal stem wall with concrete floor, and I'm storing pipe in it, yes, sir, do I need a sprinkler?
No, sir.
If I built that, or I was gonna build that on the Loop in Paris on a 5-acre lot, today I would have to put sprinklers in that 6,500 square foot building, correct?
That's correct.
All right, if we did this new rule in this same 6,500 square foot building, but we had this building code, and I was manufacturing canned paint. No, let's say it was 5,500 square foot, and I'm manufacturing canned paint, very combustible, definitely need a sprinkler system. But I built a 5,500 square foot building today on the Loop. I would not have to sprinkle it, correct?
No,
Yes, sir.
no, you would still have
You
to.
would still have.
Okay.
You're
Yes.
still under these same.
You're still under this.
You're still under the same thing.
Yes.
So
These COG amendments were put in place before the last.
So the biggest thing that we're changing is the guy that really does not need a sprinkler based upon this fire code above 6,000 square foot is all we're changing. So if you're 5,500 square foot and you're within the code of needing sprinkler, you're still gonna have to put a sprinkler.
Amen.
Correct, sir.
Okay, so the only thing we're changing is we're gonna go from 6 to 7. This'll help our warehouse guys out probably and some steel manufacturing guys that really don't have combustible things that can burn.
That's correct.
So
As
do you,
Mr. Lacy said, the biggest obstacle we have here is that word all.
right.
That really restricts and binds. the
You as a
company.
fire professional, do you think it's a question number 3 is something that we need to push forward on and adopt this set of rules for our local fire department? Y'all are fighting the fires. Y'all are in the deal. So
We've already adopted number 3. I mean, and as far as striking the 6,000 square foot rule, yes, it was put in place because of our capabilities to handle a structure that large. But as the mayor said, that's kind of a trade-off that you have to work with, and whether or not that affects our ISO rating will remain to be seen, but, you know, that's something we can work towards fixing if it does. That's something that the council and the city manager will have to look at.
I'm with the mayor as well. I agree with all.
I think
And
it-
changing from the city manager to the board, obviously, we haven't talked about that.
Me too. I think it's interesting, though, that question number 3 only passed 4-3.
I was the tiebreaker. And I'll tell you, but I did it with a caveat,
Okay.
is that the council be informed of why that was in there and the consequence of getting rid of it. And I think I've done that today.
Yeah.
It's there because of your fire department size, like 6,000 square foot kind of, I wanted to put it back on y'all to give you an educated, so you make an educated decision. If you just ask Mark Lacey, who is retired captain, professor of fire science at Collin College, I'd say sprinkle everything. There you go, I'm done. That's an easy, short conversation. They work, they save lives, they save property. But that's not, my role here as this committee thing was to try to move Paris forward, which was to try to find a way to help y'all, as the mayor's pointing out, not discourage development, but keep it safe, protect the businesses around them, and all that. The base code does that. It works in all cities. But all cities adopt some form of local amendments based on their capabilities. In risk assessment, as emergency management, I've done emergency management before, you have to do a community risk assessment. Well, the greatest risk to our community in this town, as me and the mayor were talking, is a weather event and fire. And the history of Paris, Texas demonstrates that fire is a very high threat to this. And we've had a number of fatalities with fires in Paris, Texas. And I'll beat a horse to death. Christians in Action changed not only Paris, Texas, I think, but I know it changed the state of Texas, because the state of Texas now requires you to be a fire inspector to go out and do a fire inspection. Whereas prior to Christians in Action, firemen on fire engines, who are just firemen, would go in and do fire inspections. They weren't really trained in that area. They would go out and try to do a good job best they could. But because of that fire, the Texas Commission on Fire Protection changed that rule, and it said firemen have to be fire inspectors now if they do inspections.
So, Mr. Lacy, just real quick, real brief, I see it as safety versus savings. That's the bottom line. So what were some of the concerns of the three members that voted against it? Just real brief.
One is the size of the department. Ron Coker, the fire marshal, size of his department, consistency. He's all about protecting lives and property in this community. He is of the same opinion, sprinkle everything. You know, he's a fire marshal. That's his job, right? That's who you want being up there, is that guy saying, save it all, you know? You don't want that guy who goes, give it up. That's his role. The Bobby Smallwood, I think, voted to keep the sprinklers. Is that correct? Who has it?
No, he voted to eliminate.
He voted to eliminate the.
He voted, who was the guy that
Brandon
voted?
Kearney
Brandon
and
Kearney.
Christina Watson.
Okay, thank you. There it is. Christina's a structural engineer with HWH. I can't speak to why she voted to support it, but she did. I think it had to do with the concern over the ISO rating.
Well, she's here, yeah.
Is that a fair statement, Christina?
Good evening. I'm Christina Watson, and I was on the committee, and that was one of the items that I voted against, because at the time, we were very unclear as to how the ISO rating was going to affect the city. And since then, Mr. Lacy has been able to do some research, explain some more to us. And one of the things that came up tonight is, if this does pass and it does affect the ISO rating, there's still the ability for the council to go ahead and change that. So at this point, it's made me a lot more comfortable with that, and I think if we voted again, I would vote for it to eliminate that provision.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more quick question. As far as someone building a building, and like Clayton said, they're gonna do iron in it, they build it 12,000 square feet, but they don't need a sprinkler system.
Yes, sir.
They business failed. Then I come in with my combustible item, I just wanna buy the building as is.
Yes, sir, you're gonna have, because the occupancy class would change your commodity. Remember I mentioned earlier, the commodities you store have a lot to do with that as well, and that's in the code as well. I'm storing, that would change that occupancy from a S, non-combustible, to an H. Same building, but now I've changed the use to a hazardous occupancy, which is gonna require you to upgrade the life safety features in that building.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have something.
That'd be when you got your occupancy permit or whatever.
Doesn't matter. Once you change the use of the structure, that's gone.
I think what he's asking though, what would our code how would we enforce that? on
Yeah.
someone?
During the CO process, you're gonna buy it, you're gonna go for a CO, and you're gonna come in and you're gonna have to tell us what you're putting in that building, because you're gonna have a certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, so we have that in place in our codes, though?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I want to make
When
sure.
you go get your certificate of occupancy,
Then we come out and do an inspection to see what you're doing, and the building official and fire marshal will talk to you about what you're doing there.
Yeah.
And if you said, I'm just storing rocks, and we come out and find you got toluene, acetone, gasoline, and diesel stored in there, obviously, we're gonna take action to stop that from happening. And, which brings me to the final thing I would like, unless y'all have some other questions, is we have done the inform and educate process here in Paris. I think we've done as good a job as we can do. I know I've been preaching it at every coffee shop I go to and everybody I meet. But it's, at some point, you have to move to the enforcement phase. I know that's not popular. No one likes writing citations. No one likes paying fines. But I would give you this analogy. I could post 75-mile-an-hour speed limit on the highway, and we all drive 78, 79, right? Why do we not go any faster? Fear of a consequence. That when next bridge we cross, that trooper's gonna be sitting there and going, uh-oh, right? Without a consequence, there is no enforcement. I can only say, please, and will you mind, and please help us so often. Those workable. Some people are going, cool, I'm good with that. That's why you don't write them the ticket first time. But when you have numerous repeated violations that you're not getting I was a police officer. In the police academy, we used a phrase called play nice in the sandbox. If they don't want to play nice in the sandbox, you've asked them, please don't kick sand in the other person's face. Please comply with this. You know, come on. I've given you a warning. At some point, enforcement has to take place. It's not always popular, but put yourselves as parents. I think all of you have children. If you always said, I'm gonna count to 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, pretty soon, it doesn't mean anything. There has to be some kind of fear of a consequence. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be mean. I'm just saying that in your ordinances, you already have enforcement in there. We have deliberately not been going that route because of the educate and inform, trying to get people up to speed. But at some point, I think your staff needs to be moving that direction. I'm not saying it needs to be an all or nothing, but for those repeated non-compliance offenders who are risking not just their own business and their occupants' lives and the customers' lives, but those businesses around them. Downtown, we had a fire that didn't just impact that one building. It impacts others. And so at some point, I'm not picking on them, I'm just giving you an example. It does not just isolate itself to the property line. It goes beyond that. And at some point, you have to say, and then put it in front of a judge and let a judge adjudicate it. Your city attorney, your municipal court can handle those things. It's not a criminal offense, it's a civil thing. You can do it through re-inspections. You know, you can charge re-inspect fees so they don't want to fail the first inspection or second inspection. Or if they continue to not want to play nice, then at some point, your code officials have that authority to write a citation. But when that happens, y'all are going to be the ones that hear about it, right? They're writing tickets to me, they're picking on me. Well, you might want to trust your staff that they're not out there doing that. You have a city manager who's in charge of those people, and he can get you the information he needs. But I would tell you that all the law enforcement people and code officials I've met in my career, there may be one or two bad ones out, but I haven't met them. I've met most of them good public servants trying to do a good job. They just want to go home at the end of the day like everybody else and have a cup of coffee and chillax. They're just trying to do their job. But they need to have support of the leadership. Your staff needs your support. They need your clarity of vision. And they need you to to consider in your strategic plan allocation of resources. I think that's the overall thing I've seen in our community. This is a very small piece of it, but to take Paris to that next level, I think you all are the key to that. And that's, I think I've talked a long time, Mayor. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Lacy?
No, sir.
Stephanie, how are we supposed to do this? We got three pieces on this. Do we have to vote on them separately?
Yes, sir. Because in the existing code, they are in 3 separate chapters. I've done 3 separate ordinances. I think they're going to be more combined when we get our recodification done, but this is where we are right now. So if you could take these individually.
So we have to make a motion on the building code updates first, before, then fire, then,
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Plumbing.
and then plumbing, yeah, so. All right, we have to pass or not pass the building code updates. Do I have a motion on that?
Remind me which one we're looking at here now.
Yeah.
13.
We're on,
That's pretty much what we've been talking about on the 6 different items, correct?
yeah, these 6 items encompass all of those.
Well, they impact all 3 of these. It was just a global discussion. But your first is number 13, and that's going to be amending Section 718 of Article 3. And that's going to be amending the local amendments to the 2015 International Building Code and the 2015 International Residential Code.
Those will amend them to,
It's amending the amendments to what y'all just talked about.
All 6 of those questions.
Well, we're eliminating the one about the city
Okay.
manager.
Except for number, well, I'll make a motion that we amend Section 718 of Article 2, Building Code, Chapter 7, to revise the local amendments to the 2015 International Building Code and the 2015 International Residential Code, and adopting all of these except for number 5. All of these amendments except for number 5. That's the motion I'll make.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion, a second. All in favor? Okay, unanimous? Okay, great. Item number 14, anybody, this is amending the fire code. We have to make
Correct.
the same motion here.
I have one question.
Yes.
On something I read in here, all of it about fireworks was drawn through. We're not saying it's legal to have fireworks in the city, are we?
Those were the, no, those were what were brought to me.
We can't hear you. Sorry, or I can't. Everybody knows I'm deaf.
What was taken out there is you had a definition of a 1.3G and a 1.4G firework. Those definitions are already in the fire code. Those actual definitions had come forward from our 2006 code amendments, and they had just been copied in. So they were eliminated because they're already in the code.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well, speaking of
they were
some-
duplicative.
Speaking of something that's not enforced, that is not enforced, but it will still be illegal to possess fireworks in the city limits.
Yes, ma'am.
To possess them or to shoot them off? Is it illegal to possess them?
Possession.
Even possession, okay, okay. All right, back to item number 14. Well, I'll make a motion to amend Chapter 12 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Paris, amending Article 3, Fire Code, Section 1253, Fire Code Amendments, to make the amendments we've listed here, except for number 5.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And item number 15, I'll go ahead and make, any discussion on this, plumbing and gas, or I'll make an amendment to amending Chapter 25, Plumbing and Gas, Article 2, Section 2517, same amendments of the Code of Ordinances to include all these items except for number 5.
Second.
All in favor? Yay, we got that done. Okay. Item number 16, discuss and possibly act on engaging the services of a third-party engineer firm to review the utility bond project. Mr. Path.
Yes, following our last city council meeting, of course, we had a discussion regarding the MLK and 17th Street projects, and the council worked with the contractor and staff to ask questions on that. And so it was pretty clear that there was some concern about the performance of the project, and so I viewed it as important that I make an item here for the council to discuss. At one point, an item was discussed about maybe having a third-party audit to come in and see if the project was indeed done correctly and overall, just whatever the audit would entail and so forth. So, again, given that was kind of out there, the agenda item itself was not designed to say yes or no to that, so I thought it'd be good if we discuss that tonight and see if the council, if there are indeed concerns with the project, that the decision needs to be either to have staff work on that or to have a third party do that. I'd recommend that a third party do that. I'm not qualified to go through the 5 years worth of records to determine whether an engineering project was done correctly. And so I think having a third party outside source do that would be more appropriate if we do this. And so I'm not saying we should do this. I'm not know if it's, I don't know if things, I personally don't think it's probably warranted, but if the council is concerned about that, obviously it's the council needs to decide those things if you have concern about a project or not, whether you need to have a third party review it or not. And so I wanted to have this item here for you to discuss and decide if you like to approach a third party or not. And so obviously, with city engineer resigning, myself and public works director Michael Smith will be working to move the project forward, and so that's where our focus will be at. So having a third party will help to get that off our shoulders, so we don't have to review those prior history there. So wanted to just bring it to you for you to discuss tonight. If you want to give some guidance, if you want to proceed on that, or not. So.
Well, hasn't our Public Works Director, Mr. Smith, hasn't he been involved in this project? From what I understand, he's been very involved in this project. So he should be pretty much up to snuff, so to speak.
Well, again, we're talking from the discussion last week. There was the idea of having a third-party engineering firm come in and see whether the project itself was done correctly, whether the work was done right, whether processes were followed correctly, whether the contract was followed, and so forth. That's not something that Public Works Director would do. And so, and particularly Michael Smith, he's been Public Works Director since July now, I think. And so he's now jumped into that role recently, and so he's not been part of the project since day one, as well as I haven't either. So.
I thought he was an inspector on part of
For
the project.
For parts of it, yes. And so, but he was not involved in the management. He was not involved in those decisions. He was inspecting parts of the project, but not obviously the whole thing. We have a third-party inspector, EST, that was doing the inspecting for the project itself. So,
So, Mr. Path, the concerns I have are, we had this plan, the major plan all drawn up, and there were significant things that were supposed to have been done, and we're not necessarily what was in the ground. There were requirements to fill in the ditches at the end of the day, was essentially never done. There was requirements to have flaggers. I don't think they had a flagger a single time. There was a requirement to all the devices had to be made in the United States. I've seen photographs of the ones say China all over them. These are the things that were not done. And there's a significant number of them. They may not affect the quality in the ground, but some of them do. My concern is that we paid AECOM to come up with a plan, and AECOM came up with this plan. You do everything by the book. This is it. You control two-way traffic. You control people's driveways are repaired to specifications. All of these things, and the contractors bid this out expecting to have to do this. Except they didn't. And I would like the inspector to come in and say, yes, they hired a flagger. We can prove it because we paid their salary. Yes, they closed all the trenches off as they're required to do for the convenience of the community. And the people on 17th Street suffered because of this, and because it wasn't done and the contract was not followed. Whether it affects the quality, I hope you're right. Hopefully there is substantial quality. Although I have serious questions of the repair jobs that were done at 6th and 8th Street, and hopefully those will be repaired. I know we've got the base issue on that, and we don't probably need to get into all that. But I hope that the contractor will finish that out. But I'm I'm wanting to make sure that, see, what we should have done is if the contractor wasn't going to be required to do these things, then we should have bid the contract out and let everybody know, oh, by the way, you're not going to have to do all this stuff, so you can bid us a cheaper price. But what we got a contractor that bid and said he would do it, and then didn't do it. And nobody held its feet to the fire, and the corners were cut, and savings were made, and, you know, the citizens of Paris were inconvenienced. So I would actually like a report as to what parts of this contract were not followed. And maybe that's just an accounting thing. Maybe a lawyer could do that. I don't know that we'd even have to have an inspector look through the documents, make sure all of the make sure all the compaction documents are there, make sure all the tests were done, make sure that all of the contract requirements were done, or document that they were not done. And if they were not done, then so that's what I would be looking for. If it comes up that there's a significant quality problem, and to be honest and to be fair, I don't think we have significant quality problems in some of the underground work. I do think we have significant problems with the roads and the streets and the repairs. Really, the repairs should have, if they'd been done according to AECOM specification, the repairs should have been the one part of the road that was good on some of these old roads. That's the part that should have been the best, but that's not the case. And so that's what I would like to see. I would like to see an inspection on the repairs of the road and whether or not the contract was followed. Because if, I've been into this years ago, if we bid out the contract and they say, I will do everything in that contract, and then we don't make them do it, that's the wrong way to run a city. If we get it back from AECOM, no, this is unreasonable. We don't usually put flaggers. We don't usually require all of this. Fine, strike it from the contract so that everyone who bids on it now can make a more competitive bid. That was my whole problem with this. And so if we have an inspection, and that's up to the council, but if we have an inspection, my focus on, because I don't want to be digging up pipes or anything. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But things that can be superficially inspected, perhaps with the patches in the street, documents that can be looked at, and the exact requirements of the contract that we can go down. I mean, again, was everything made in the United States as it had to be? And I've seen photographs that say China on them. And so there's photographic evidence that they violated the contract, and perhaps there should be economic consequences for them. And I'd also like to look into the process of weather days. I got an email, I was looking at some emails, and I found they had requested, when I said I thought we had 60, how many weather days did we give them?
I don't know.
Okay, so do you know how many weather days we granted them? Okay, because I saw the email where they requested 91, and this should be 91 days. They basically looked at they bid this project out assuming it wasn't going to rain for 4 years. That's what they did. They said, oh, well, if it rains one day, hey, we get an extra day at the end. No, that's not the way it should have been, and I think that's not the way it in fact is. You look at the average number of days that rain is expected, and they take that into consideration. Then if you have a hurricane or a monsoon or something come in, and you have 15 extra days of rain, that's legitimate. But I saw in this email, they're claiming that they had 91 days of weather and 110 days of additional work that and see, if they have one day, if they have one person that has to work an extra day, then that whole project's bumped down an extra day. Even though they're allowed to have 4 crews on. How many times did they have 4 crews working? Probably none, right? So 3, and the maximum number of sites they could work on was 3 at a time, but they could have 4 crews. But according to the email I saw, they were saying that they're not into liquidating damages until November 4th. That was their, and I didn't see the email with the city's response to that. These are things I'd like to look into. I'd like to look into whether the extensions were granted properly, whether the roads were patched properly, and whether or not every single item of that contract that was required by the contract was in fact done. That's what I would want to see from the inspector.
And that's exactly what I'm proposing to you.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's not for staff to do that.
Exactly.
You would need someone, a third-party engineering firm. I've actually approached one already to ask them these kind of questions
And
here.
completely independent of any of the firms that we have around here, yeah.
If this is what the council wants to do, then I would highly advise that if that's what you want to accomplish, we get a third party to do that. So staff, we're not qualified to do that kind of work.
And they would present to the council their findings,
What
right?
would it be? I just kind of kind of spitballing with this gentleman I spoke with. It would become a sit down. The council would talk to this individual, relay your concerns. Again, being an expert in the field, they would kind of explain to you how they would go about doing it, what they may examine. They may kind of what's the term to use for? Kind of ratchet into it. So instead of doing a full bore, you may, okay, we're gonna inspect so much and then see where that's at. And if you think you need more, we'll do some more. That way you can kind of, if you wanted to spend more, you can at that point. And so, because sometimes, again, talking to them, projects do not always go per the plans, and so that's normal. And so he may be able to explain to you, well, this is how it would normally work. And so if you want to spend money looking into it, I can do it for you, but it's how it works. And he may be able to alleviate your fears up front. I don't know. And so that's where having a third-party person can do that. I can't do that. I'm not that person to answer those kind of questions and so forth. But
I think it's a great idea to do it. I think it's something.
It would be an expense, obviously. And so I think
But it's not 25 million, is it?
No. So not at all. So.
Well, I have a question real quick.
Yep.
Is this something that we're gonna be doing on all of our projects?
I
Is
would-
to have a third-party engineer firm to check and make sure the contractors, I mean, isn't that what we have city staff to do? We have inspectors that go out and
in
look
this,
at
in this project here, we had a third-party inspector involved in this project here, and so I would hope that we would not do this in every project. Again, I've only been here since April, and so I've not seen the whole project here, but from what little I've seen, I don't see the concern that I know some people have expressed, and so I've been through big projects like this myself, and so, but again, it's not my concern that's at worry, it's the council's concern. If you're concerned about it, that's what we need to address, and so hopefully in this process here, we may learn a few things. Maybe we learn what we can do differently. Maybe we learn how projects work. I don't know. We may learn a bunch of this information to where we may, all around, from council to staff to what we look for in contracts, we may be able to do things differently. I don't know. And so that's what we would hopefully learn from this. So hopefully we don't have to have a third party every time. But again, councils change over, and so it's up to each council each time to decide they want to do something like that.
So and to go along with Leonard's thing, I thought we talked about one time that whoever the engineer that designs the project, they're gonna be responsible of checking the contractor's work, because if they design it, they know how it's supposed to be.
So that's my recommendation going forward for future projects. We would have, instead of having multiple parties involved, you would have the
Yes.
same person involved from start to finish. The same person who designed it also knows how to read it and so forth. So one point of contact,
Yes.
one person to go to if issues happen, not multiple people involved here. Now, what we did here is not abnormal. It's just, in my experience, it's been better to have one entity design, inspect, do that. And so that's my experience.
So, and then that we did have a third-party inspector on this job, as I stated in the last meeting, that, I mean, I know he was nice to the citizens of 17th and Martin Luther King, but did he do his job on the inspection part? Because we had a lot of balls dropped that he should have caught. If we're paying him to be the third-party inspector for us, he didn't do his job.
And again, I think that's the question: were there balls dropped? And saying, what were they? How big were they? How important
we
were
had
they?
11 out of 12 or 10 out of 11 tests failed. Somebody
Yes.
dropped the ball.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to defend anyone. I just
Yes.
know that happens, and so I've experienced that.
10
and
out
so-
of 11 happens? I mean, one, two, I mean, but that's the whole job.
Yeah, when you have
itself.
an entire road section, when it rains on one, it rains on the whole thing. And
I
so,
understand.
Yeah, and so I'm not trying to defend them. I just know that things like this can happen. But again, it's not my concern to be relieved here.
Yes.
And so,
I'm just saying, not on that, I'm just saying that we're checking everything, then we paid that person some sort of taxpayers' money that I don't feel like he did his job as far as protecting the taxpayer, because that was a very inconvenience project that I don't think he didn't come to us with any suggestions or anything to let us know that it wasn't going right. I mean, so he's been paid for a job that I feel like he didn't do. So, but as far as bringing in a third party now, I feel like, looking at Martin Luther King and the way they've done it, that might last 6 months. That's going to be tore back up. 17th, they did the whole street. I don't know how long it's going to last, but the patches on Martin Luther King is no more than what the city does going by, fixing potholes.
And again, this is what a third party can kind of be your advisor, your counsel. This is where that person can kind of ask these questions of them, and they can tell you
Yes.
how it does or does not work, whether it was done right, whether it wasn't done right. And so that's where I would put that in there,
I agree.
in that court there. Again, as your advisor, I mean, I would always encourage you in open meetings here. I mean, until you know for a fact, I would not assume a contracted party is wrong until we know for a fact that normally that's wrong. And so I just,
Well, no, that's why I asked, did
Yes.
he give us, I mean, there's no assumptions. If he did give us recommendations, were they not followed? So a ball was dropped somewhere, so
Yeah.
I'm not assuming anything.
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question, if he did, if we're paying him to be a third-party inspector and he's inspecting the job, and then we went through what we went through and he didn't come to us with any kind of, hey, this is going on, you need to address this, then he was just there earning money and going home. Speaking and going home, because we all can agree that that project on 17th from Clement Road to Martin Luther King was botched for months.
well, again, that's where a third party person can kind of
Yes.
answer. I mean, yeah.
Could I ask you a question? Who is responsible for, the inspector's looking at the pipes and the backfill and stuff like that. Who's responsible to make sure that they follow the contract on the requirements for flaggers, the requirements for fixing the driveways, the requirements for putting the backfill in at the end of the day? Does the inspector do that?
Third party inspector should be doing that.
So the
yes.
third-party inspector should have noticed that pieces were made in China because they had China written on them. He should have noticed that, and this isn't hypothetical. It's clearly, there's no question. There are some aspects of it that are at question, but there's no question that corners were cut and that the contract was not followed to the T. In fact, numerous shortcuts were taken, which saved the contractor a lot of money. So those are the things I would like to see inspected, in addition to all the things, the quality issues. And I think maybe we can meet with, if the council votes for it, maybe we could come up with some potential people and we could at least talk with them, and then the council could give them instructions as to what they want to do.
I have someone that I can bring to you, and so I worked as an engineering firm before my last community. They do large projects like this, and so I've already spoken to him. And so it's something that I can introduce you to him, and so you can obviously interview this person, see if you feel comfortable with him and his firm to do that. So, or else you can also interview multiple firms. But I do trust this individual. I think this individual would be a good person to approach, and he said he'd like to talk to you about this. And so we can work through this. Give me a little bit of time to figure out the logistics of this, and but we can try to get some set up for the council to speak with this person. And so at some point.
Because it's obvious that the council has concerns. It's more of a council concern thing. So we're not gonna resolve it tonight, so.
Yeah, correct, yes.
But we need to determine if we wanna take your recommendation of a third party, and I think we should, because that's the only way we're gonna go forward. There's obviously some trust issues, so we just need to bring a third party in, see, like you say, we don't wanna say somebody was wrong when we don't know for sure yet, but obviously we don't know who was wrong or who messed up on this, but somebody did. So the only way to resolve that is to get a third party in, let's see, and move forward.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the item is here for tonight. So,
Right.
because I knew there was obviously, again, you don't want to continue, if this is a concern of the council, you don't want to continue on without ever having addressed it. And so without ever having gone back, because there's always the lingering what if, could have, should have kind of thing. So, so that's why I wanted to bring this to you tonight, so you can consider this and go for that. And again, I don't know the expense of this. I don't know. That's going to be driven by how much work you assign them to do, and that's why this individual can explain those prices to you. Again, it's engineering rates, but that's for the council to work with him. So,
Well, I'd like to make a motion if it's all right. I'd like to make a motion that we hire a third-party engineer firm to review the utility bond project.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, Ms. Path. Number 17, discuss and act on meeting dates for November and December. Janice, what do you want to do? How do you want us to meet?
Normally, every year, November and December, the second meetings are canceled. So that's what I'm recommending. You'll do the second meeting of each month, or if you wanted to, you can reschedule them for another time in the month.
So the second Monday in each month?
The second meeting of each in November and the second meeting in December.
Option one looks pretty good.
So Sounds good
I
to me.
think we just need to have one meeting in November and
Yep.
one meeting in December. I don't think we
Yeah,
need to
just
add
one
another
meeting,
one.
yeah.
Okay, will somebody make a motion?
Yeah.
Can I accuse myself from that? Because I won't be here for neither one of them.
Are you making a motion, Clayton?
I'll make a motion to adopt option number one, cancel November 23rd and December 28 meetings.
Second.
All in favor? Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Item number 18, convening the executive session pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with attorney to receive legal advice from the city attorney about one, pending or contemplated litigation, and/or two, on matters in which the duty of an attorney to or client under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflict with this chapter, to wit, including but not limited to review of competitive bidding laws. It is now 7:14. We're going into executive. Okay, get everybody seated. All right, it's now 7:49, and we're out of executive. We obtained advice from their attorney, and no action was taken. Item number 20, future events. Anybody have anything to suggest here other than our non-meetings? Okay, motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Yes, sir.
Can I get your phone number?
Yeah, sure.
I thought I had